When we open up our Torah scroll, we're finding that we're still in the wilderness. So welcome to the continuing wilderness. It goes and goes and goes, keeps going. I've had the opportunity in the last couple of weeks to be traversing wilderness in Aotearoa in New Zealand. Beautiful bush, as they call the wilderness. Trees and rivers and lakes and waterfalls. It was incredible to be with family, to honor the memory of my aunt, and to be immersed in such profound beauty. And then I have returned to a different kind of wilderness, to the wilderness of our lives in this moment, all that's unfolding in our community. It's an overwhelming time in these past weeks since I've been home. There have been crises of health in our community, of loss of housing. And there have been, and there is, ongoing pain in our city, in our region, in our country, in Israel, Palestine, in Ethiopia, in Ukraine. Overwhelming wilderness. Kind of missing being in the bush. And yet this is what is here now in these times. I've heard two different people say this week, historically unprecedented times. Is that true, or is in every moment of history it was historically unprecedented times? I mean, I could feel what the people were trying to represent in the bigness of what this feels like. And one of the things that's profoundly incredible about being a Jewish person is knowing that we've had historically unprecedented times for thousands of years. And our people keep going, finding resilience and love and strength and struggle. So here in Torah, part of how we keep going, here in Torah is this wilderness. And there is so much about the lev, so much about the heart in this moment, the heart-mind of the lev. We have journeyed, we were having some incredible moments. We left the narrow place of Mitzrayim, we were at the mountain that shaked, and then we were given so many commandments, and then we were told to do this building project, and we got a lot of details, and it began with each of us giving from our hearts, what our hearts moved us to give. Nidiv Lev, a generous heart. That was the beginning of this building project, is to find generosity in our hearts. And then the next stage was to find the skilled artists who could do the building. And they were described as having wise hearts. Chachmat lev. They had wise hearts. We need generous hearts. We need wise hearts to build this dwelling place for God's presence amongst us. That's what the Mishkan is. We are building in the wilderness a sacred place for God's presence to be, for the divine presence to be amongst us. So we're in it right now in Torah. We're in it. We're in the building, and it's our second time around. Rabbi Aaron shared with you when I was away about the big incident of the molten calf and the big mistake, and then what it means to repair and to continue on. And so now here we are in the going again. We gave again, we're building again. And we are told in the very first verse of this parsha, back into the building, these are the records of the Mishkan of the witness, of the testimony. Hamishkan, Mishkan ha'edut. There is a double here, Hamishkan, Mishkan. And if you are a Torah commentator, that makes you very excited. We got a double, everybody. Feeling that every word is sacred and here for a reason, when we get a double, it's very exciting. And inside of the stretching of these words, why would there be a double right now? What does that mean? The Sfat Emet, the Ger Rebbe, sees this 19th century rabbi and connects this moment with another moment where there's a double, where Moses is at the burning bush. And when God calls to Moses at the burning bush, there's a Moshe moment, a double Moses. Moshe, V'yomer hineni. God calls out Moses, and Moses answers, hineni, I am here. Here I am. So the Sfat Emet says, it is just like this. It's like this double where Moses is called twice. When Moses is called twice, we hear that Moses is this coming together of the divine and a human. The coming together of the sacred and the everyday, the divine and the human. And Moses holds all of this inside of Moses' self. The Sfat Emet says this is wholeness, holding our divine and our humanness together. And that's what the Mishkan is doing. It's a dwelling place amongst us to connect with the divine. This place of bringing together, a place of wholeness, shalom, shalem, wholeness. So here's an invitation that a repetition is a sacred moment. A repetition could be a sacred portal, a connection point between the divine and our everydayness. Repetition? Really? Repetition? Yes, repetition. When it comes around again, that thing that I always do, that place that I always find myself, that pattern that I'm always in, that's a sacred portal? Well, maybe it can be. We, friends, in our own personal lives, we repeat a lot. And if this is a news to you, you're like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. No, you're not the only one. It is how we find our life's path. It is how we find our spiritual curriculum. And it's how we find who we are from the repetitions that come to us. And when they come around again, perhaps there's a way to say to them, welcome, hi, welcome back. I knew you'd be coming. What could be an opportunity this time? Here you are, this pattern, this way of relating to the world, this way I stumble into this repetition again and again. What would it mean to bring wholeness here? What would that look like this time? If the question was asked, what about this moment of repetition involves the possibility of connecting the sacred fully in me into the wholeness of what's happening? Wholeness, acknowledging, integrating, thinking about what new possibilities a repetition can bring. This week I had the opportunity to study with Rabbi Julia Watts-Belzer. Again, I've studied with her before, and I always learn a great deal. She's a rabbi and a scholar and a writer who has much Torah to share. And in this session, she was sharing about her new book that shares her disability wisdom. And it has such an exceptional title, I have to say. I'm in a place of trying to find titles. So if you're a title person, I know we have one title, excellent title maker over there. If you're a title person, you know who you are. I'd like to talk to you. Sometimes I just have like title envy. It is an incredible title. Listen to the title of her book. Loving Our Own Bones, Disability Wisdom, and the Spiritual Subversiveness of Knowing Ourselves Whole. spiritual subversiveness of knowing ourselves whole. She taught beautiful Torah, but I was like, before the session ends, you gotta talk about that title. And she said that wholeness and arriving into wholeness as a paradigm was so important for her. It opened up so many things, and she sees it all over our tradition, this urging towards wholeness. And it's a different lens than what we usually see in disability. It's a different lens in what we often hold in our struggles, as various and diverse as we are. Really, though, repetition and wholeness, I know that sometimes can feel hard because it can feel more encouraging to just shut it out. To shut it out, to not want to go around here again. Let's not go around here again. Especially in relationship, when we move from the personal and my own patterns into what we are doing together. And when those go round and round and round, sometimes we want to shut that down and shut that off and be like, yeah, I know the rest of the story. Let's not talk. But here too, in this dynamic, in this discourse, in this round and round again, what if we stopped in it and said, I feel we're going around again. It's a repetition. It's an invitation. It's an invitation for wholeness, for greater wholeness, for seeing what could be possible here. What could change? What could shift? What could move so that this repetition looks different, holds more expanse, holds more possibility? I'm not saying it's not going to come around again. It might. But it will be changed by that. That moment of asking, somebody's got to name it. I think we've done this before. I think we've had this conversation maybe 100 times. I'm hearing from some of you in the community that you're trying to have conversations right now that are difficult. And they're particularly painful with your kids or your parents or your siblings or your aunts and uncles and others in your life, but especially these family conversations, difficult conversations. Many of you are sharing it's hard to talk about Israel and Palestine. And that you've told me they've gone badly, these conversations, a couple of times, and now you're out. Or they've told you they're out. What would it look like to come back into the conversation, to allow the repetition to open to a new way, to open to a new way of hearing or connecting with each other? I'm not saying that this is easy. I'm not saying that entering into repeated conversations that always go the same way is easy. But I do want to, with all of the ometz lev we've been talking about earlier, with the strength of heart, encourage you to go back into the repetition of those conversations in a new way, in what could be possible. This past weekend, Palestinian activist Sally Abed and Israeli activist Alon Lee from Omdim B'Yachad were here in LA. Tali, the musician who's with us, she plays all those recorders. You know if you've seen her because she plays them like multiple at once. Anyway, she was one of the organizers of this get-together, and a group of us had Shabbat dinner with them, and they were talking to us about the urgencies and the complexities of shifting what's happening in civil society in Israel to create and organize a larger voice for the desperate need for security and dignity and survival and human rights for everyone who lives in the land. And we talked about many, many things. And as you know, I continue to uplift the voices of Israelis and Palestinians who are talking about their contexts, where they live, with clarity from being a person who lives there. And I know, too, that our context is different from where we live here. And knowing that, I said to them, I know that this is not your context, that you're in a very specific one, and everything you've shared about what you're trying to do and how you're organizing and your particular strategy, many, many strategies, this is theirs to shift civil society. Can I just ask, though, for a moment of reflection on what you think is happening over here? And Alumni took a big sigh and was like, wow, you guys are going through something over here with your discourse. It's like you can't talk to each other. And he shared his urging that we try and open up the narratives that are happening here, to start to talk about what's happening there as peoples trying to figure out how to share the land and to change the narrative. And the second thing he asked us to do is to think about what we can do, which is about the US government. And some of you saw the letter that we shared from Chua, Rabbis for Human Rights, on that topic. And it gave me pause in hearing, in some ways, an outsider's reflection on what's happening here. And it made me think about how important it is to know the context from which we're speaking and to ask for others who are not right where we are to tell us what they are seeing and thinking about what's happening. There is an incredible chasm. It started as fissures, but have become chasms in our community. Chasms between generations. Chasms between Israeli Jews and American Jews. Chasms between, I don't even know what the word is anymore. Maybe there's another request for a title. But organized Jewish community, is that a word? Institutional Jewish community? And those who are not part of that. And who gets to speak and how and when on behalf of whom? Part of my practice in this time is to continue to connect with and engage with folks in our community who have a different perspective than I do on what is happening. Partially because I know that we are not hearing from each other. And when we don't share with each other, how are we going to urge and nudge each other and help each other to grow and change? And of course we know this is not just around Israel-Palestine that we are not connecting with each other around perspectives that are not our own. And it's also because I see repeated perspectives speaking for the whole of the Jewish community, and there is so much complexity and gorgeous diversity in who we are and how we think and feel and relate to the world. And I am desperately worried about what is happening and what will happen in the future of our people if we cannot connect with each other. But I'm not saying that it's easy. I don't want you to think, oh yeah, my rabbi said I should call you since we fight all the time and let's have an easy conversation. That is not what I'm saying. David shared a podcast this week with Sally and I. It's one that I have heard before. It's For Heaven's Sake from the Hartman Institute. And this particular one, Donielle Hartman and Yossi Klein Halevi are speaking about differences between the two of them around what's happening with the food crisis, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And at some point, Yossi had this sum up moment where he said, I see. When things are happening, my perspective is, oh, look at what those others are doing to the name of the Jewish people. And what you are saying is we need to look at what we ourselves are doing to the name of the Jewish people. We need to be holding both of those. And we need to be in situations where we can at least attempt to build the trust, or hopefully we have enough trust with someone where we can have these conversations. You know that we are doing this here at Nefesh, or some of you know that. We're having repeated and ongoing, structured, facilitated conversations so that we can have the difficult conversations together. And if you want to hear more about that, I hope that you will ask us. And one thing we are wondering about is whether or not it would make sense to do one of these dialogues in which you bring a family member in which you're having a hard time talking with. So that's a question. That might be something you want to share if that feels like it would be useful. Conversations alone are not going to bring the change we need. It is not only about endless listening and sharing, but conversations can lead to actionable change, to actionable requests. This is part of having a difficult conversation. I'm listening to you. I'm sharing from my perspective. And now the next step, I'm going to make a request of something you can do, or in a very Jewish way, don't do. That is part of what it means to be able to come into a situation that feels like it's always the same, and we always repeat it and say, let's not do that same thing. Let's listen fully to your perspective. Will you be willing to hear mine? And then can we ask each other what we need for there to be change and to make requests? Believe me, I know, because I've been making requests. That doesn't mean the person has to agree to do that. That doesn't always happen. But when we're not having the conversations, we're not in a place where we can even get there. Repetition can be an opening, can call forward a sacred opening to new possibilities. Repetitions in my own self, repetitions with me and you, repetitions in our community, repetitions in what's happening in the broader world around us. May you see your repetitions. May you open them up, and may they lead to greater wholeness for you and for your relationships and for our communities, and may they create, please God, possibilities for change. Shabbat Shalom.
How many times the wind and tears and holding on in the rain? How many times the light and dark, the dreaming and the pain, over and over and over, playing out the timeline. Over and over and over, playing out the timeline. birds and the strangers beneath the clouds. Up and down moves birth and death. The poets in the square putting it down, trying to get it right. Try over and over and over, playing out the timeline. Over and over and over, playing out the timeline. What you know you forget. You believe in myth. What you